It's gonna rain like this for days. I'm gonna drown in my old ways. But I'm fine. I'm fine. It's gonna hurt like hell when you pull back the hammer and fire. But I'm fine. I'm fine. You see, a storm knocked out my superpower. Now I sleep through thundered showers. Wake me when you learn to be cool. If I'm the captain of this boat, then all my shipmates are fools. And all the stars in the world couldn't help me steer my way out of this kiddie pool. I'm gonna wake up from this dream with nightmares lined up on my street. But I'm fine. I'm fine. Needed a hand to keep my head up, so you put hooks in both my ears. But I'm fine. I'm fine. Yes, it's a chronic pain in my ass, but no, it's not a burden. It's ironic that I drink to make my inside stop hurting. And it's a love that gives me heartburn. It's a song that makes my stomach turn. And I wouldn't trade my head for all the aces in the deck. 'Cause I'm fine. 'Cause I'm fine. 'Cause I'm fine. 'Cause I'm fine. I'm fine.
I left Texas the morning after a vicious storm. The winds blew over the farmland, rustling my papers, sending some of them flying all over the porch. I scurried and scrambled to weigh down all my papers and notes as I huddled up in my fiancé's bathrobe, bracing myself against the winds. I had watched the dark clouds brewing, slow and steady across the flat Texas land, and the blue faded into the color of midnight with swirling ominous clouds on the horizon. And the wind whipped and whistled across the open country air that night, hours before the storm actually hit. Late that night, I was awakened by thunder, clapping loud, shaking me out of sleep, shaking the house. The whole room lit up with lightning, and the monstrous sound of thunder came shortly behind the brilliant fireworks. I lay awake, wondering if my son would wake up, frightened. I lay awake, listening to the rain and the wind, listening for my son to cry out. He slept soundly through it all. I left Texas the next day, and I hoped to miss the storm. It was a slow-moving storm. I thought of Katrina. Although the skies looked clear in Texas, I soon ran into the rain. I even had to pull over at a rest area for a while, soaked to the bone from just hopping out to pee. My son, once again, slept soundly through it all. He woke for a moment when we sat huddled in the rest area parking spot, the heaters blasting because I was soaked as if I had taken a shower. His little eyes lolled around in recognition of his mother, and he was assured enough to drift back to sleep. I finally got ahead of the storm and managed to beat the bad weather for the night. I stopped in New Orleans for the evening, but I changed my plans a little, deciding to leave much sooner than anticipated. I wanted to beat the storm out of town. As I packed the car up the next morning, the skies were beginning to get dark. It was still early, but the sky had become overtaken with the eerie feeling that New Orleans gets right before a storm blows through. The dark and bright at the same time, the strange and haunting conjecture of light and dark, two ends of the spectrum, two halves to make a whole. Then the wind that can send a chill right through your bones, even in the hottest of Louisiana's summer heat. A dichotomy of the senses, and all the hairs on my arms can stand up with the sense of the air pressure. The wind was whipping as I headed out of town that morning. I thought of all the times I saw the wind whipping down the streets of New Orleans. I thought back to Katrina. The winds whipped more fiercely those days, but to me, in my state of addiction, it was all the same. Little did I know that then my higher power had put his hand down, blocking my path, forcing me to make a choice, breaking through my denial bit by bit. Something began to tell me that I had a greater purpose to achieve. I had more reason to live than just this meager existence. I had survived all these horrors for a reason. Everything happens for a reason, I would soon come to find out. As I drove away from the storm headed to New Orleans that morning, I thought of all the significant parallels in my life and in the life of this city. When someone first suggested the more than obvious parallel of my memoir, I was almost surprised to see the parallel between Hurricane Katrina and the storms of my addiction. An English professor first pointed it out, describing the beauty of the internal storm of addiction amidst the external storm of the hurricane. And I realized as I drove out of New Orleans that morning, with the eerie storm clouds whispering sharp breezes of New Orleans as the storm approached, I realized how much of it really is a parallel. The storm of my addiction parallels Katrina, and my demise parallels the demise of New Orleans. We were both forced with a choice, and we both chose to rise above it. In order to rise above it, we sometimes had to leave behind parts that were really important to us. But sometimes you have to close the chapter to be able to write the next book. I think back to all the places I visited this trip, places I described in the book. All of them boarded up, condemned, overgrown, forgotten, or just plain disappeared. And I realized the parallel here too. I too have torn down those places of refuge in my memory, digging deep into the recesses to describe them to the best of my ability to my readers. And I realized that these descriptions are all that are left of many of these places, and they both have become another chapter in the book. I think back to writing the book and revisiting some of these places. Emotions were stirred to stand here now at these spots again, no doubt. At times, I felt like I could not breathe as I saw some of these memories in my mind. But that experience was nothing like reliving them through my writing. I want my reader to know what it felt like to be there and to do that, so I must go there myself. When I start to write about the past, I always begin the story in past tense. But as the writing escalates and all the images flow from my mind to the paper, the story often turns into present tense. And I realize that my knees are often shaking and my heart is racing, and that I am having a physical reaction to be so closely into the memories of these often unsettling events. I think back to the power of writing about it and the personal release for getting it all down. Cathartic, healing, and then I too shut the chapter on these places. So it is fitting that my descriptions would be some of the last pictures of the scene. I think back to Full Circle, and I realize that this is the point that my story has finally come to. It has finally come full circle. My life has come full circle in so many ways that I cannot even begin to describe. And my writing has become an integral part of my work and my life. That is everything I ever wanted. I have a happy family and a wonderful life, and that is everything I ever dreamed of. I headed out of New Orleans that morning as the winds began to whip and the water of the lake started to ripple with the insanity of choppiness. The wind whipped my car up on the bridges, and I realized, this time, I was headed away from the storm. I realized that I was steering clear of the dangerous winds and rains, while I took my child home to safety. And I was heading home because I am now a responsible adult who has things to take care of. It dawns on me as I videoed the storm leaving town that I truly have come full circle.
We'll never know which way this road is gonna turn. Can't be sure how quick your wick is gonna burn. So sing to me your darkest secrets. Time to leave behind your regrets before we get lost in the blink of an eye. This carry on that's been forgotten, left for dead in the sun rotting. And the answer lies here in this tragedy. It ends with you and me when we're dragged from the light into the night. We have been warned which way this storm is gonna blow, but where the riptide takes us to, we'll never know. So now you're screaming out for Jesus or for anyone. Please save us before we get lost in the blink of an eye. This carry on has been forgotten, left for dead in the sun rotting. And the answer lies here in this tragedy. It ends with you and me when we're dragged from the light into the night. So sing to me your darkest secrets. Time to leave behind your regrets before we get lost in the blink of an eye. Well, this carry on has been forgotten, left for dead in the sun rotting. And the answer lies here in this mystery that starts with you and me when we're dragged from the light into the night, into the night, into the night, into the night. Into the night.